Welcome to this video lecture where we're going to talk about developing a design idea for the value study assignment that you have coming up. The purpose of this lecture is to provide an in-depth description through an example from my own portfolio of how I want you to think about putting together your value study project. To prep for this project, you should have read the Linda Essig excerpt entitled Lighting Composition that I emailed to you, and also have read the assignment description on the value study assignment that I sent out. In this lecture, I want to examine a process for developing a lighting idea by first analyzing a text, then using visual research to inspire some thoughts on lighting quality and function, and then converging those ideas into a complete lighting design idea. So we're moving from text through a research process and into a small light plot on this project. So to illustrate this point, I want to take you through an example from my portfolio. This is from a production of a play called Suicide Incorporated, which was at the tiny little Gift Theater a couple of years ago. This is a very small theater space and the scale seems appropriate for the assignment that we're going to work on. I'll tell you a little bit about the play. Suicide Incorporated tells the story of a man who takes on a job with a company that specializes in creating and editing suicide notes for people who are about to take their own lives, which is a little absurd. Not too long into the play, you learn that this man that we've just met that has taken this job has recently lost his own brother to suicide and is struggling with that loss. And here we're looking at the ground plan of that play that takes place in two locations primarily. The office where he has taken this job and his home apartment. So for most of the play, he goes back and forth between being in the office where he's writing these suicide notes and being at home in his apartment. And on the ground plan, the office is there, that wall unit there at center, and then expands into the stage left area of the stage. And the apartment is centered on the stage right wall unit there that has a couch, and then bleeds into the center stage area. So in compiling visual research to inspire a lighting design idea for this play, I was looking at contemporary color photography because this was a contemporary space, and I was really looking at guys who would exist in these two spaces, the office and the apartment, the home. Looking at these places to figure out what the difference could be between the office, the look of the office, and the look of the home. I looked at a lot of photographs with male subjects because that's who we were going to be looking at in this play. I gathered a bunch of images and kind of quickly found that I could, of the things that I liked, I could classify them in a couple of ways. The first couple of images I want to show you have to do with the office. And this first one is by photographer Doug Dubois. And what I liked about it was the kind of softness and the cool light of the image. Made me think of being in that sort of corporate environment, the office lights being on, maybe fluorescence, maybe there's a big window, but some sort of cool light. And the softness of it contrasts for me with the guy in the photo who's got this, he's got sort of a 5 o'clock shadow already. He's looking a little rough. And in this play, I knew that we would start to see this character who's coming in to this office job every day. He starts to just as he loses control of his life, he's just looking a little bit more and more rough. And having the lights contradict that, I think, supports his deterioration a little more. The second photo is by another contemporary photographer, Brian Ulrich. And it appealed to me for kind of the same reasons that that color, sort of no color, but a cool color palette and it's a relatively soft image, not a lot of harsh shadows. I wanted to contrast this with these images of the apartment, what I think the difference between the office and the apartment is. And the more I thought about it, I thought that it really is about a high contrast, where the office is about softness and no shadows and this kind of light that exposes everything. When he goes home to his apartment and he's struggling with this grief and a little bit of guilt due to his brother's suicide, that there are shadows, and maybe he sits around in this apartment and he hardly turns any lights on at all, and he just sits and stares into space. And so this first image that I was attracted to is by photographer Eric Ogden. And of course it helps that it's this guy and he's kind of languishing on this couch, and there's this one light source that's out of the frame that is affecting him. But I want to primarily focus on this next image by photographer Hugo Fernandez, because the composition of this photo in particular really led in large part to the idea of light in the apartment. And it's really about this small, tightly focused source of light, probably from a lamp, coming in from the side, modeling the side of that figure and leaving a dark side. It's a really high contrast image with lots of shadow. There's no color, and the stark contrast lends, for me, it lends a mood of depression, loneliness, and that kind of introspection that can just be toxic when you're in a state of grief. So how does this image of a guy sitting on a couch in a little spot of light become a lighting design idea? Well, I can take this image and start to think about where the sources of light are in relationship to the figure and how I can apply that to my situation on stage. So here we're looking at a ground plan, kind of bird's eye view of the top of my figure, so that I can start to think about what the relationships of these light sources are to that figure. And you see they're coming from stage right. I have a source labeled lamp. That's the most important source. That's really where the idea comes from in this image. Some people call it the key source, or you could call it your idea light, your key light, or your idea light. That's the light that holds the main idea. It probably is going to be the light that's the brightest. And you could argue that in the photo that we looked at that there's only one light source, and it might just be that lamp. But I know that when I move on to the stage, I'm creating a situation that isn't really like sitting in a room, and that I need to complement this light source with some other lights to kind of flesh out the idea. So one thing that I might want, if I'm using a real lamp on stage, I might want some other kind of light that helps reinforce the idea of light coming from one side of the stage, but that is also going to give me a little bit more visibility, because I am dealing with an actor who a director might want to see a little bit more of. But I'm going to keep that light off to the side, but a little bit out to the front so that I can get some visibility. And that's what I'm calling here my warm lamp reinforcement. I also know that my lamp, I'm probably going to want to keep it in a warmer tone, because I know that in the office it's all about the cool daylight of the office, and in this apartment it's a little bit more claustrophobic, and I want to tie that to the idea of a lamp. So I'm going to designate this as a warm light source. So let's look at this image again, and I think with my light from the lamp, I've pretty much taken care of the realistic light that exists in this space. But what else do I want to capture from this image that's so compelling to me? And I think part of it is the high contrast and the modeling of the human figure. So what I want to do is go back to that bird's eye view again and think about how I can get some of these ideas that are present kind of emotionally in that photo, but not realistically, and how can I incorporate them with my design idea that's happening on stage. And one thing that I might want to do is extend that modeling to kind of come around the figure a little bit, so that no matter where you're sitting in the house, you still get this idea of the bright light maybe hitting one part of the body and casting this dark shadow. So I'm going to add a top light here that will hit the top of the character's head and maybe spill onto the shoulder, so that even if you're sitting over on the dark side of the lamp, away from the lamp, you can still get that high contrast image no matter where you are in the theater. And I think I'm going to go ahead and maybe keep this a little bit cooler than I have my lamp source, so that I can play the two together and I can maintain this idea of contrast, this high contrast that I like in the image, where the warms and the cools are kind of in argument, so that we can't really slip into a comfortable kind of homogeneous color look. So going back to my diagram here, I've got one more light that I put on here that I'm calling a cool fill. And this is really just to give me an opportunity to add a little bit more visibility if we get into a scene where the director wants to see a little bit more of the face. I may use this a little, I may not use it at all, but when I look at my plan without it, I see that there's kind of a hole over there, and I just want to be ready to accommodate the fact that there are actors involved in storytelling on stage, and I want to be able to accommodate that if it becomes an issue. So I want some sort of light that I can kind of sneak in on the face to provide a little bit more facial information if I need it. But to maintain that contrast, I'm going to separate it from that idea of the warm light coming in from the front side on stage right that's acting as visibility light with a little bit of warmth to connect it to the lamp. I want to separate this other fill light by maybe keeping it in a cooler tone. That way I can play these two lights if I want to at the same time, but I'm maintaining some contrast there. So in this final image, you can see how that key manifests itself into the light plot in a really direct way. That you can see that channel 21 symbol over there on stage right. That's the lamp, the practical floor lamp that was on the floor. That was kind of the motivating idea for the whole image. You can see that channel 2 is that warm lamp reinforcement, that idea of warm fill light from the front that's connected to the idea of the lamp. You can see that channel 12 is coming in as that cool fill to contrast with the warm, but still give me a little bit of visibility there from the front. And then you can see upstage I've got a channel 6 that's coming in from behind or from down to provide that modeling that I said that I wanted. Another thing that you can't see here is the section drawing of the space where I worked out the photometrics and where exactly all of these lights should be, but you can certainly see how the area lights for this idea correspond to that diagram that I made, that key, which corresponds to things that I found in that lighting research image that I knew I wanted to incorporate into my lighting design for this text, which is about this man and his introspection and his grief, and how that connects to these visual research images. And so a lighting design idea is born.